Alrighty, so for our first segment today, we're going to start with our BTB, or before the bell. And so I'm showing you the slide you would have seen if we were meeting today live in class. And I'd like you to take a few minutes to try to do today's before the bell. So if you'll see on the instructions, I've asked you to approximate the square root of each of those radicals. What is the square root of 45, 107, and 10? What are they each approximately equal to? You may need to go back and take a look at your notes from the play pause it over the break, but I'd like you to take a few minutes to do that right now. So go ahead, hit the pause button on your YouTube video and try to work those out. And when you're done, you can click play and see if you got them correct. Okay? Go ahead and hit pause now. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at each of those. I was asked you to approximate the square root of each of them. So we're going to start with the square root of 45. Okay, actually let's go ahead and back that up for just a second. We'll drop it right in the middle. The square root of 45. And you'll recall that when we learned how to approximate square roots, what we were really doing was thinking, what two roots does this sit between that we know? So there's a whole list of perfect square roots we know. We know the square root of 1 is 1, and the square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of 16 is 4, and so on and so forth. We came up with a whole list when we worked on our play posit previously. So what we need to do is that we got to identify which two perfect roots sit right around 45. And there's a square root that sits just a little bit above 45 that we know, and that is the square root of 49. And the root that sits just below 45 is the square root of 36. Now, since we know that the square root of 36 is plus or minus 6, and since we know that the square root of 49 is plus or minus 7, that tells us that the square root of 45 sits somewhere in between 6 and 7. Okay, so we're looking at 6 point something. Now, it doesn't sit directly in the middle of the two. If it did, then we could approximate with something like 6.5. But it doesn't sit directly in the middle. We'll notice that this is sitting a little bit closer. 45 is a little closer to 49. So this is going to be a decimal a little bit bigger than 6.5. And if I was approximating this, I'd approximate it at about 6.7. Somewhere right in there. I think any approximation from about 6.6 to 6.8, anything in that range would have been a pretty good approximation for the square root of 45. So if you needed a reminder how to do that, how to approximate a square root, and you just watched the last video, and you think now you might want to kind of change your answer or go back and try the other two, feel free to do that. The next question that we're going to look at here is the square root of 107. I believe that was the question. Yep, square root of 107. So if you'd like to, if you haven't already had a chance to work this one, go ahead and pause and try it. And if not, we're going to go through it together now. Okay, so let's talk. Square root of 107. Right, so we're talking about which two roots are close to that. Well, the square root of 100 is close. It's a little bit below 107. And that one's equal to plus or minus 10. The square root of 100 is plus or minus 10. There's a root a little bit above it. You may not have thought of this one right off the top of your head. You may have to look back at your notes. That's the square root of 121. And the square root of 121 is plus or minus 11. So since the square root of 100 is 10, and the square root of 121 is 11, the square root of 107 has to be somewhere in between that. It's going to be about 10 point something. Again, it's not directly in the middle. It's a little bit closer this time to the 100, so let's call this about 10.3. But again, I think anywhere in the like 10.2 to 10.4 range. If you had any estimate in that range, you did pretty good on this one. I'd guess it at about 10.3 personally. All right, let's go check that last one here. Our last BTB is looking at the square root of 10. Okay. So let's look for that. We've got a root just below 10. We know a perfect square root at 9. The square root of 9 is plus or minus 3. And the next square root above that, the next perfect square root above that is the square root of 16, which is plus or minus 4. And so the square root of 10 has to sit somewhere between those two perfect roots It's going to be about equal to 3 point something, and it's a lot closer to 9 than 6. It's probably right in the 3.1, 3.2 range. I'd say anywhere in that like 3.1 to 3.2 range is a pretty good approximation here. I'm going to say about 3.1. It might be a little bit more than that, but somewhere right about in that area. Okay. All right. So that's the end of your BTB. I hope that you remembered how to approximate those roots. We're going to be moving forward in our next task for today, task 2. I'm going to send you over to PlayPosit to complete a PlayPosit video. And in that PlayPosit video, we're going to revisit some square roots, but instead of approximating them, we're going to learn how to simplify them. So that'll be your next step today. Check out that video. And then make sure you're taking notes throughout the whole day today. As you do each of your tasks for today, take notes because you'll submit all those notes to me at the end of the period today. Okay? I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will be talking to you via PlayPosits real soon.